Schönen guten Nachmittag, meine Damen und Herren. Willkommen im Sonic Lab. Willkommen beim wievielten? 6. Vortrag schon vom dreitägigen Pro Impro Symposium. Da geht es um Improvisation im allerweitesten Sinne. Und ich freue mich sehr, jetzt einen Spezialisten ansagen zu dürfen. Jemand, der unser 12-töniges chromatisches System erweitert durch Microtonalität und das schon sehr lange macht und ein unglaublicher Meister darin ist. Er heißt Philipp Gerschlauer, er lebt in Berlin, er unterrichtet an der MDW in Wien und hat auch als Saxophonist mehr als genug zu tun, und ich freue mich sehr, dass er heute Zeit gefunden hat, um über die Quartertones in Bebop oder überhaupt an seinem Instrument uns was näher zu bringen. Herzlich willkommen, Philipp Gerschlauer.
Ja, hallo. Das ist ja ganz nett von euch. Ich begrüße euch. Vielen Dank für die schöne Vorstellung, für die schöne Einladung. Ich rede ja immer ganz persönlich, wenn wir jetzt hier so in trauter Runde zusammensitzen. Erste Frage ist immer, ist Deutsch okay? Deutsch, ne? Deutsch, Englisch. Ich kann auch so ein bisschen zwischen German, Deutsch. English could be good. Okay, that's good. You know what? Actually, I like to keep it very personal and to explain like things that are interesting for you and just go into some kind of communication and exchange with you, because I'm not only here to provide you what I have been doing, but I'm also interested in finding out what you think about what I'm doing, what you think about my projects and my approach to microtones and my approach to application of microtones in jazz and into bebop. So I think the nicest way to start is always to play a little bit of music at the beginning, and that's actually what I would like to do. And I got the PowerPoint presentation later, which will kind of guide us through today, but it's something to just get a little bit structure. But I also like to improvise and to talk to you like in person, as I said. I would like to play a tone, and I don't know if it's going to be too loud because I'm amped. So let's try very carefully. Sounds good, no? Not too loud, no? No, it just like to start the day, or like my playing day, and a lecture with some music, because this is what actually brings us here, and what tells so much more about what I can tell with words. Because even if the lecture is called like quarter tones or microtones in jazz or in bebop, in the end it's all just sound. And there's so much more to music than intonation, because it's an expression of our innerst feelings. And if we take care of intonation and of like how we play notes, we can learn a lot about a style of music, in these terms bebop, and we can uncover a lot of things that have been forgotten or like lost knowledge. So when I talk about microtones, I don't want to reinvent, or I don't want to destroy what has already been established. I just want to take things that have already been there and look at them from the perspective of what happened in the past 100 years. Because everything has already been there in the arts, but we just get a new perspective on things by just re-looking at the same old things. Okay, so microtones in bebop. It's about expanding the language. So my first question is like really, and this is a very scarce presentation, so I'm just popping in some notes, because I want your focus not to be on the screen, rather than here, because I want to be in connection with you. That's what I said at the beginning. But when we talk about bebop, we usually have like lots of chromatics. Now it's a very fast and rapid style, using fast tempi, using chromatics, using resolution, using guide tones. So when you play like you can hear that we like use some chords and root motion and melodies. It's a very melodic style. And what does bebop even mean? Yeah, so that's also a question we could tackle, but not today. So we got lots of different resolutions. And the question is, how can the microtones, like all of these different shades of sound, like the notes in between the notes between the black and the white keys on the keyboard, how can you integrate this in jazz or in a certain style of bebop? And you know, as I played at the beginning, I think blues is an important foundation of bebop. And we will talk later about the topic of like cultural appropriation and decolonization of the arts and so on. Because I think this is very important, because I'm talking as an artist here about a style that I have not been born into, and about a culture, whatever that means, that I'm not part of by birth. But I think this is still okay if I do that. So first example that I played was like a little bit like that, no? sounds like that you would usually associate with blues. And I want you to invite you to listen to like a really nice recording that I've brought to you. And it's by Bertha Lee and Charlie Patton. And I hope we can hear this now. It's this one, no? Let me just play it on the iPad to see if it works there. Warum geht denn das jetzt nicht? Hä? Ja, warum nicht? Wisst ihr was? Wir sind ja jetzt total pragmatisch. Ich spiele es mal über das iPad ab, ich ziehe mal hier raus. Und jetzt geht es so, das iPad ist ja auch laut genug, das könnt ihr ja hören, wir sind ja so wenige, ne? Müssen wir nicht so lange warten jetzt hier. It's just this one phrase. Recording is from 1934. Charlie Patton and Bertha Lee. It's one of the last recordings Charlie Patton did before he died. In the style of the Mississippi blues. So actually the style is much older than 34. And you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me this is all what music needs. It's It's just like super modal, one chord, one melody, and about expression, feeling, and intonation. And you know what I did? I analyzed this and had a look at, okay, which pitches are actually used. So, what is blues actually all about? So I took the Melodyne, and let's see if this now works now. Hope so. Good. And that's an AI split. We only hear the guitar now. See all the pitches here, all the pitches from the guitar. We can see that we have a B, an F, B, D, major third. When we scroll now, we see that we have a tuning of 448. That's extremely high. So I think they just went into the studio and just played. And when you look at the you can tell that like the F is you see the D tells you is minus 14 cents. So it's has this feeling of a major third in just intonation. So it's all based, it appears to be based on overtones. And it appears that Charlie Patton went into the studio and tuned his guitar according to the overtone row, having a just intonation fifth, using a just intonation third, and this creates this nice sound of like and if you follow, you could expand this and use a minor seventh, which is the seventh overtone in the overtone row, and you would get a sound like and it already pretty much sounds like blues, because if you go and start gets you this blues feeling. And if you play this in equal temperament, you go like which sounds more bluesy? That's why I ask my students like all the time. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer or do you like So now when I talk like that, I'm defining pitch as something quantized, working in quantums. Saying like a pitch is a defined note. Quantisieren, you know what I mean? Like going on the piano and you have black and white keys and you do not have anything in between, you go like... And when you want to have something in between, you need to go like... You can do like half tones, but that's all you can do. But this doesn't apply to all instruments. You know, guitars, they can bend. And the voice, check out the voice. Because if we look at this and listen to the vocal, listen to vocals here, we see that the voice is going like, whoa, like all the time. Let's have a little quick listen. Like this note. So how do you define pitch? Where's the pitch? What's the exact note that has been played? And if you look at the literature and you look like in the sources you find like in the 50s and in the 60s, you usually find, oh, these people couldn't play in tune. They didn't know what they were doing. I went to New Orleans, listened to this and that blues player, like a lot of very nasty racist remarks. It's like we all listen to a bad performance of Mozart, I assume, right? But this is not Mozart's fault. So, no? And if you look at newer sources like, I don't know, Mathieu, for instance, then it's like always, okay, where is the exact blue note? Where's the exact pitch? What's the exact pitch for the minor thirds or the sharp 9 interval? So a very typical blues gesture, which goes like, let's stay in the key of B flat. And I'm not talking about a phrase or something, I'm just talking about a gesture. And I have many different ways of playing this. No? When you go like, or even. So, where's the pitch? I can bend, I can do glissandos, I can do whatever I like. And you know, when analyzing this, you can see the pitches. And if it says like 12 cents here, it means it's 12% higher than an equal temperate note. So just very generally speaking, when we define the pitches of tones, the usual way to do is to say, okay, equal temperament is the fundamental of all analyzation, and we say like this tone is like, let's say 10% of a half tone higher, or 12 or 13. And 1 cent is so much that it's like super hard to tell. 1% of a half tone, now you can imagine. And if you go through that, we can you see, we can like really scroll and zoom through this recording and look at every pitch you can find and say, okay, how has the note been played, and what's the intonation? And as you can see, Melodyne is taking like trying to find out what is considered to be one tone, and then shows you a curve, and you can see that the usual blues curve goes like from low to high and then lower again. So that's a very typical way of how blues intonation works. And I did one interesting thing, one analysis that I'd like to show you quickly. It's because I notated every tone from this recording. Ah, das geht jetzt nicht, weil ich muss wieder reinstecken hier. Jetzt müsstet ihr es gleich sehen können. And you can see that, like, so the tuning is B flat, composition is in B flat, and guess what? How many different D flats you can find in this composition? Or in this composition, this song, you find all different kinds of varieties. So sometimes Bertha Lee and Charlie Patton play a D flat, the sharp 9 interval, like 50% too high, then 44%, 32, 28, 23, 21, 15 plus 8, minus 5, minus 17, minus 32, minus 35, minus 39, minus 45. So you can basically the whole range of a half tone can be used for the intonation for blues intervals. And how great is that? Because now we can start and can actually facilitate that and can practice this and can use this in improvisation and can just play around with this, like playing a blues like that. And bend and play different kinds of flat thirds, sharp 9 intervals, different kinds of sevenths. So there's a variety of what pitch can be, and ich hatte eigentlich mein iPad auf Bitte nicht stören gestellt. Anscheinend haben wir unterschiedliche Ansichten darüber, was das bedeutet. Okay, geht weiter. So we can make use of just intonation and blue notes, extend chromaticism. Now we can alter the guiding tones, like we go. We can apply this to the typical bebop scale, which goes like do, ti, la, le, so, si, la, ti, do. You notice like the step between the 6th and the 5th, you go like. But why not bend every half tone in the direction it wants to resolve and go like. And play around a little bit with this. Hm? Ja, ihr könnt gerne immer fragen. Ja, zwischendurch. Fragt doch einfach zwischendurch.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, if you have a question, please take the microphone, because we need the questions in the stream. I'm wondering, how do you do that? With the embouchure or with keys or?
That's the next slide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how you do that, and how can it be applied to other instruments? It's the next topic, no? Technical aspects. You have fingerings, different key combinations. You can use the embouchure, and if you play saxophone, you know, like that's a typical exercise for beginners. You take a tone. You bend it by just releasing your embouchure, opening your throat a lot. That's a typical exercise to also do vibrato, and to learn vibrato. And this creates some kind of glissando, and now glissando is the exact opposite of like quantized music. Also einmal Musik, die quantisierend funktioniert, und einmal Musik, die nicht in Quanten funktioniert, wie das Glissando. Ne? Es gibt quantisierende Instrumente, Klavier, und nicht quantisierende Instrumente, like the voice. Ne? Okay, just a very two ways of looking at music theory. And yeah, controlling the intonation and the airflow. I developed a fingering chart for the alto saxophone. This is a small excerpt which contains over 600 fingerings for a saxophone. So designed for the alto saxophone, but it also works on other saxophones. And you can tell that here you see the cent deviations. So now we have an E flat here, E flat plus 1 cent, plus 1% of a half tone. E flat plus 2 cent plus 4 cent, higher than equal tempered E flat, plus 6 cent, plus 9 cent, plus 10 cent, plus 12 cent, plus 15 cent, plus 17 cent. So you have like a lot of different fingerings for the same tone, but very minutious and very small intonation differences in intonation that you can apply to different contexts, depending on the speed, depending on the sound, depending on the style of music, depending on the dynamics, and it's a whole library, and basically that's what it is. It's a lexicon that one can look at, and I also look at if you have a certain situation where you need a certain pitch or need to achieve a certain pitch. But just to give an example how minutious they are, you go like, that would be the first one. That's the first one, actually. And the second one is. So that's the second one. And if they sound the same now, that's what it's how it's supposed to sound. And the first one. And the second one. So you see it's like a different timbre, a different sound, but they are super close next to each other. I'm not using all of these pitches and not all of these fingerings, but it was a technical exercise that I started because a friend of mine, Johnny Reinhardt, from who I met in New York and worked with, he's a bassoonist. He divided the octave into 128 notes. And he asked me if I also could do that, and that was what I practiced when I finished my studies. After my master's studies, so we would go like. And so on, but this is really, really, really small and tiny pitches, and it would be like. Do I go on stage in a swing tune and go like. No, because you would feel like a hamster in a wheel of like running and not going anywhere. And now you need to ask yourself whether you play a bebop head and you go like. Or you go like. Audience is still going to clap same way whether you choose this note or you choose the other notes, which leads us to the question, how far can you go in a certain style of bebop? When I play contemporary music and you have to hold like long tones, then it might make sense to use a more evolved fingering, but at the end, to be honest, this contains like 600 fingerings and I'm using maybe 120 per octave of them, which is still a lot. Huh? Good, but you know, it's like this really small differences. Maybe there is no need for this. Okay, ask in between. No? Just like. Yeah.
Just a very quick question. The notation you're using, so
yes.
C1, 2, it's like the palm keys.
Yes.
And the C3 down there would be like the E key or something. Okay, but why do you name it C? 1, 2, 3?
I'm following the French labeling system of that I used of in classical saxophone literature, which labels the fingerings, especially for C, in the order they appear when you play chromatically from high C sharp to high D, C1 key, C2 key E flat, C3 key E, C4 key F, and C5 key would be a high F sharp key, which I do not have because my saxophone doesn't have it. And the T keys, if you see some T maybe there, like TC means like trill, Triller on C. Or TF gibt es auch noch, das Triller on F. And that's basically it. X means it's closed, and whole means it's open. 8 is the octave key. 8 is the octave key. D sharp is D sharp. The rest is, I think, self-explanatory, but that's a very short way to notate. Yeah. Harmonic aspects. I personally like to play ratios on a monochord at home because I'm just like the sound of a monochord, and basically that is you can see this is my monochord I use at home. And if you say, now that's not a monochord because it has more than one strings, then you are right. Technically, this is a polychord and not a monochord, but we still call it monochord out of pietate. So, and because of historical reasons. And there's one interesting thing that when you divide the length of a monochord string by 2, you see this small line here. No, actually you do not see a line. But there should be a line. Maybe I can zoom it. Maybe is there a chance to zoom it? Nein, jetzt habe ich es kaputt gemacht. Okay. Okay. Now you can zoom it. And you see there's a line which is the octave. There's 1 to 2. So this line divides the whole length of this strings into 2. So if you put your bridge at this spot here, then you hear an octave. And interestingly, there's 2 ways to achieve the sound experience of an octave. So the first thing you could do is like you take your monochord at home and take the bridge and put it at a place where you think it sounds good. So your ears tell you very precise, it's dim, 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 tell you where the resonance of the octave does not produce any beating, no physical experience of like mistuning, so to speak, and your ears will tell you exactly the spot where the octave bridge needs to be. And the other way to achieve this is you just take the mathematical approach, and you take your bridge and divide it by 2. So you get the same result regardless of whether you apply your ears and your feeling or whether you take math. So math and our inner feelings is it's the same coin, but 2 sides of the same coin. And it doesn't make sense. Es ist ein bisschen so, wenn man drüber nachdenken. Das ist sehr. And if you divide the length and the string of a monochord, ich mach mal ganz kurz, ich will mal weg. If you divide the monochord by 1 and by 3, you see that also the ratio of the fifth, of the perfect fifth, claims some space you see here. This is the fifth, 1, 2, 3. And you sort of here, no? So the fifth has lots of space around it. So basically this chart is, I take this string length and divide it by all numbers up to 30. So you take any length and divide it by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 30. Of course, 4 and 8 are going to be the same. But then you get this like barcode kind of thing. And this barcode is, all the visuals tell you about how the ear perceives consonants. Because your ear can clearly tell the difference between a perfect octave and an octave which is slightly out of tune, like here. And your ear can also tell you the difference between a third, which is in tune, between a fifth, and a fifth which is more off, and a double octave, and the perfect third, and the ratio of 5 to 6, and 6 to 7, and 7 to 8. But you can tell that like the space between these becomes smaller. So the dissonance increases. And so it's harder for the ear to tell if it's in tune or not, which opens up the possibilities for to play with pitch and to play with sound. And if you look at the minor third interval here, or the sharp 9 interval that we talked about in blues, it's not surprising that there's like a lot of intonation flexibility on these tones, because also from the graphical point of view, we can tell that, okay, it's harder for the ear to distinguish whether this is played correct or not correct, or whatever this means. Or very simply put, if you play a flat 9 interval, and you sing this higher note a little bit out of tune, a little bit higher, ist nicht so schlimm. Whether when you play a unison and you're a little bit off, even not an untrained ear can tell the difference. Yeah? And so the relation of mein Bart mag dieses, my beard doesn't like this microphone. Can you still hear me? Okay. And even if you have like this little bit intonation, so there's lots of possibilities to play with intonation here, and to use small number ratios like perfect octaves, perfect fifths, and perfect thirds. Sind da Fragen zu? Ja, so ein bisschen so? Okay, gut. So having said that, we can now apply all of these principles over regular chord changes. So this is actually what I have been practicing in the past 10 years or so. You take a regular chord change, and now we have a chord progression which a little bit sounds like Coltrane changes. Like you go like, to just stick with major keys, and we create the key of C actually into G. And apply all of the things that I've just mentioned to regular chord changes. So when I play a G chord here, I like to play a regular G, a major third, perfect fifth, some kind of an equal temperate sixth. I go to a minor seventh of the G chord, then I'm in the chord of B flat, and I use a chromatic, like a quarter tonish approach to the sharp 4 interval, creating a guideline from the 5th of the B flat, the sharp 4 of the B flat, and the 3rd of the B flat. And you see the 3rd of the B flat is already raised by a quarter tone, and is a guide tone to the next E flat, which needs to be in equal temperament because it's. I can just play it for you, maybe. If I go like. Just like take the same chord progression and rephrase it by altering all the guide tones, no? Like the same thing. We have like here an E flat, major third on the E flat, but this is a G, and the major third on a G. To play a G lower on the saxophone is hard because there's no real fingering, so I skip this one and leave it as is. And by the way, the tempo is very high anyway, so don't worry on these minutious intonation changes. But yeah, we have perfect fifth here, and one could mess with the perfect fifth, but if you take a major chord and you play the perfect fifth out of tune, like lower, you can tell. Like this is the... You need to ask yourself whether you want the sound of like messing with the perfect fifth, because remember the monochord before, you see the perfect fifth has lots of space around it, so it's harder to mess with the perfect fifth. You want to leave the perfect fifth remained untouched. And basically this is an example of how you can use guide tones. Because if I would not play guide tones, if I would play it without guide tones, it would sound like... But if I use the guide tones, I get more. So I'm applying these two principles that I learned from blues and use every natural seventh interval lower, like a just intonation seventh, every third lower, major third, and whenever I can, I use a quarter tone as an approach note. Okay, so this is kind of what I have been practicing, and I still practice when I play like through blues. Like let's say you take a Parker blues or a blues progression like Confirmation, Charlie Parker. I just gave you an example of how to alter the head of Confirmation, which goes. Erstmal so weit, and I go like. And so on, and you can just like mess around a little bit, and I just try to find out whatever I like. And I try to play this and achieve this on a regular blues. So I would like go through different keys. Like 3 different keys of a regular blues progression, You can also apply this to like a ballad. And so on, to like play a little bit with the sounds, and I always like to experiment. And I don't care if something works out or doesn't work out. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. It's life. Yeah, and we do this at the MOOC where I teach. So I'm conducting a microtonal ensemble there, and I'm trying to find out how, simply put, others can achieve microtones and use microtones in jazz or in bebop. So what do? You just have an ensemble, you teach, you have some students, very talented students, beginning of their 20s, mid-20s, different instruments. They've just been assigned to an ensemble or just choose this voluntarily, however. And they play saxophone, they play trumpet, they play guitar, they play piano, double bass, whatever. And I just take all of them. I just like to try to work with them and find ways how to achieve this. And I always like to create a safe space for microtonal experiments. So like an ensemble where all can just participate and try out things that are not obliged to do in other contexts. And to just like go into the unknown field and to open ourselves to new harmonic sounds and to new harmonic possibilities, and to improvise from a point of view and with a certain intonation approach that is not used otherwise. Because all of these sounds are not so common in, at least in all the blues and theory books students usually read. You know what I mean, no? And yeah, it's a laboratory approach to ensemble playing. And maybe we just listen a little bit to this and to see, because they play a composition of mine that I composed. So I compose for this ensemble, the students also compose. And at the end of the ensemble, I'm interviewing the participants, and I do guided interviews and try to analyze what worked out, what didn't work out, and try to get some ideas for future work out of this. And this is also what I'm doing my PhD on. So now I'm doing my PhD on this, but I've been doing the ensemble much longer, and I've also been working on this like much longer, obviously. But that's a good way to gather data. And yeah, let's just have a listen to a rhythm change that I composed. See if this works. If not, I know what to do. You need to give me 2 minutes. No, it doesn't work. I have no idea what to do. Sollen wir gerade noch mal hier drüber. Ich habe es schon gleich. Ich habe hier schon die Datei, habe ich hier auf dem spiele einfach hier, was müsste die sein? I don't play on this. It's just the students, no? I just like to listen to people having fun, you know? And it gets this like monkish vibe where you feel like, okay, these sounds are already in Monk's music, but he just didn't play them because he didn't have a tool for it. So very roughly spoken, but I feel like it's got the sense of playing with intonation on a limited intonation instrument like the keyboard, no? And so I just enjoy playing. It's lots of fun.
I have a question.
Sure,
for this.
always.
Do you have experience in this ensemble with singers too?
Yes.
Because
yes.
I feel like with singers,
super.
It's very important that they, or like we have a reference that we go after,
Yes.
unless we have perfect pitch.
No.
And
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yes. And no. Yeah.
Maybe.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to ask. Like, how do you? What is your experience with that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like without making it sound random. And
Yeah. So singers is super nice to work with because they just don't think too much like saxophonists or like other instruments. Do I need to bend like higher, or what's the feeling for that? Singers, they just do. And they just take the pitch and they just do, and you play burp, 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 and they copy. And they just blend into the sound, and then they just adapt to the sound that is in the room. By opening up the sonic scope, singers are usually the fastest to accept, because if we compose with like just intonation, and if we follow the barcode that we saw on the monochord, if we follow that principle, then they can adjust because it feels natural to them. So it's a very good experience with singers. Always, they usually like it, and sometimes they don't realize it because it feels so natural. And they do it anyway, because when you sing, the singers are the ones who do anyway. And so it always has very, very been a great experience. And just got some quotes from the students. So like when they say it was like a safe space or like a sandbox, or okay, like a safe space, sandbox, you had to agree on some things, there were rules, and it was a frame that kept the whole thing intact, like the form and the changes, no? But there was definitely, I'm going to stick to the word encouragement, so trying to just get people hooked up to this kind of sounds. And fun ensemble, maybe not most, I don't know, but a fun ensemble. It felt like a laboratory, a space to explore without restrictions. And when we started to play the ensembles and the horns started to play microtones, you had this physical reaction. And like the microtones force a physical reaction. You go like, and you know, we do this when we play jazz all the time. And I think this has a lot to do with intonation. Like, you bend and you feel like you are a cat and you, and it's hard. And even though we are super facilitated in our instruments and we can go and whatnot, when we start to play jazz, you feel like, I search for that note, I try to hit it, and it must be a little bit hard, you know, in order to get the feeling out of it. And that's what intonation does. And just to open up students to the nuances, to get to nuances more and to open up the ears, especially piano students. And what we have been doing so far is we used a regular keyboard and then a keyboard on top and had it in quarter tones. And I realized that's a good approach for students to just start, has been proven, and then I'm using only a keyboard and I program the scales on it so they would have like completely different scales and don't know what will the output be when they press a tone. So let's say you play a perfect third or major third, no? And the major third, as you see it, is not a major third. So to open up the ears to thinking more in shapes of like, I want to go up, so I go up. I want to go down, I want to go down. And there's another thing. I skipped this next one, let's go back. It's like I just started to develop a new microtonal keyboard. Okay, there's plenty of microtonal keyboards out there. If you Google microtonal keyboards, there's more microtonal keyboard solutions than planets in our solar system. Yes. Not stars in the universe, but definitely like that. And I just thought, okay, if you press a half tone, if you press this interval, how nice would it be to not get E and F at the same time, but just a quarter tone in between E and F? You know, to get pianists a sense of like playing quarter tones and guide notes, but playing two notes at the same time and resolving. And that's what we are experimenting with this semester, like last week, this week, next week, and trying to see what it does to you if you can go onto piano and go like, but you don't have two keyboards, but you just go like that. So that's one important aspect. Yeah, Fragen?
So I would have. I had two questions. The first one you just answered partly. So I'm a keyboard player.
Yeah.
Most of what I wanted to know you just talked about. You know the C board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So and the other thing, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yes.
This approach and also the idea with, but maybe it gets in interaction with playing something else. But anyway, it's very interesting. The other question was a completely different thing that appeared to me before you played the ensemble recording. But what is in this context Ornette Coleman for you, and how does he fit into this great field of
playing? How does he feel? Okay, so first, different microtonal keyboard solutions. I was considering a lot, but it's very technical practical questions. So when I play my own music, I usually I play a lot with Georg Vogel on the keyboard, and he has his own system developed, and he's practicing this the whole time, and it's a different thing. But when I teach, I have students that need to have one semester and like only limited rehearsal space, and I do not want them to learn a new instrument because I want them to access this intuitively on a niedrigschwellig, simplest way as possible. And also, they do not have the instrument at home. They cannot take it with them, and it's like it's not practical. So, I want to be for this semester. I want to be a door opener, and then say, okay, if you like it, then let's continue the work, and we can continue this work for the rest of your lives, if you want to. But just for this one semester, I wanted to keep it like as accessible as possible. The second question, okay. How to put it? So Ornette Coleman has a very free and liberating style of playing melodies and playing structures that are so unique and so great, and he's definitely making use of microtones by not playing in tune. So does John Coltrane, playing a little bit higher. So does Dexter Gordon, playing also a little bit higher. So does Jackie McLean, playing also a little bit higher than the concert pitch, which is like this kind of spice that you throw in order to put yourself a little bit on top of the ensemble and of the context. It's a little bit element, like when you listen to Cyndi Lauper. Just want to have fun. Like Cyndi Lauper, it's the same thing. She's always too high. And if she would be like 2% higher, then it would be unbearable, because then it would be off. But just this little thing makes it super interesting. It's like, I have this picture of like it's itching under your fingernails. You try to scratch, but you can't. And it's like this, what it makes it super interesting, super nice. And I think with Ornette Coleman it's kind of the same thing. From a very saxophonistic technical perspective, I can say that he's not using any quarter tone fingerings or any microtonal fingerings. So it's not an intended quarter tone or microtonal music in a term that I use, in a way that I use this term. However, we must not, there's two different things: music which has elements of microtonality and microtonal music. And I try to go into like a completely different thing and not using an element like a quarter tone here and there, but like really as much as I like, so to speak, no? A little bit like that. Yeah, so I try to invent this microtonal keyboard to play them, to get them some ideas to play it more naturally. And I also try to integrate this in ear training in my theory classes, because I also teach ear training and theory. So usually that's what I do. I teach ear training and theory and ensemble in Vienna and in Osnabrück, where I also teach ear training and solfeggio, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and all of these things. And that has been a very useful tool, because when we look at something like when we write dominant 7, sharp 9, what does this mean? Well, we get this interval, and how do we, or when we write tonica 7th chord, blues, T7, tonica 7th. Ja, was denn jetzt? Tonic or 7th? 7th is a dominant chord. Tonic cannot be a dominant chord. It's like ein weißer Schimmel. Es geht nicht beides. Either you play team tonic or you play team dominant. You cannot be both. Like that's what it suggests. So it's a little bit. So we put on a view from a Eurocentric point of view on music theory and try to apply it to blues, and we see that it doesn't quite catch what the music is about, because as we learned in the beginning, that's a tonic and it has a natural 7th, it has a flat 7th, and it's not a dominant, because it does not need to resolve, because it's a just intonation 7th, and a just intonation 7th is 31% lower, so it does not create any tension, so it's not related to functional harmony. So it's a modal kind of music, and modal music does not need to resolve, because a mode can stay there as long as it wants to, because it does not have any guide tones, any subsemitonium modi and so on, which resolves into in terms of functional harmony. So that's two different ways. Okay. Ja, der freundliche Herr da hinten.
How do you notate the descent numbers or the different pitches? Do you do it with numbers or with symbols or a combination of both?
Okay, it's a good, nice word game that you just brought up. How do you notate? How do you not notate? How do you notate? How do you notate this? Okay, so what I found very interesting in working with in the ensemble is learning by ear. So usually I go like, they have all their phones anyway, and I just play the melody. Boom. Copy it. So this works very good because it's just no notation, because it's just the direct way of ear playing, ear and adjusting. However, notating, you see I used arrows in the example before, which is handy, okay. I used in the other example, I used regular quarter tone fingerings, quarter tone accidentals, like double cross and double flats, which can be misleading sometimes. For students, I realized if I use it, I just use an arrow, because that just brings me what I like. And when I play more evolved microtonal music, which uses lots of different overtone combinations and very distinct pitches, I use cent values, so plus 34. And sometimes when I write for violins, I try to give the violins, and they are trained in just intonation, I try to give them a ratio, what it is. So you can write minus 31, or you can write a 4 to 7. Because then they know, it's a seventh overtone, and it's going to sound like boop, and it's going to sound like that. No? So they get a feeling of the position of the tone that they play in a harmonic context, which is very helpful. Because they slide, no? They don't have any. It's like violins, it's like voice. No? And it's always a nice way to communicate pitches by having a microtonal keyboard or having an instrument that already produces the pitches that you like. Because it's can be hurtful to tell another musician you are too high or you are too low. This is something which is associated with you cannot play your instrument. And I try to avoid this. I say, listen, there's the tone, copy it. And that's a very gentle way of communicating and taking out the fear out of intonation, because that's what I think is important, the fear of intonation. Yeah.
When you practice this, or when you probably teach it to, for example, a saxophone player, what about dynamics? Because I think intonation, dynamics, it's a little bit connected on our instrument.
So from a technical perspective, I'm really a traditionalist following the French school of classical saxophone, because that's why I studied. I started playing a classical saxophone and studying it from when I was 15 until I was 19 at the music university as a youth student. So I was like playing all the concertos and have this very traditional French school. And that's what I still stick to. So it's a lot of scales, a lot of to be precise in the embouchure, to be precise with the attack and the dynamics. So this is something which is very important to me. Regarding of quarter tones, no, just let them try to find the quarter tone fingerings on their own, because this experiencing on your own is like a very, very important didactical method to just like try to find, because if you find it out on your own, if you go through this trial and error, that's much more effective. So it's kind of constructive alignment approach, methodological approach to have them find it out on their own. So, and if they need some help, it's also depending on the student, then they give some ideas.
But definitely practicing these fingerings and the notes and all kind of dynamic, the whole dynamic range.
A dynamic range is maybe not the most hardest thing. Maybe a dynamic range, yes, you can play usually soft and loud, but definitely quarter tone chromatics is. And so on, that's a very important exercise, I would say, on the saxophone, because if you have the quarter tone chromatics in your head, in your finger, you can already go. Do double chromatic approaches, and this is when you have them already in your finger.
And these fingerings respond more or less the same. Also, if you play this fortissimo, for example, or would you maybe adapt some fingerings?
No. But the fingerings and the way to exploring it yourself helps your inner voice to be trained. and then you know the pitches where it is, and then you can also apply it in a fortissimo. It's like just if you know where it is, if you hear it in the ear, and it takes lots of practicing and doing this. But you could see the students on the recording once after one semester. Wow. Noch Fragen? Habt ihr noch Fragen? Hm? Nein? Dann habe ich hier the last slide. Cultural appropriation. Critical perspective on microtonality in jazz. I'm invading a tone system which is not mine. I'm applying. So that could have been a question that you could have asked. That's why I made a whole slide out of it. I just try to use gestures that I know from jazz, that I take from the recordings. Like you take a Charlie Parker phrase and go like. And try to bend the guide tones and try to apply the sounds from early blues, like taking gestures. Like one gesture is you just take this one and go and try to just like play this.
Isn't that one important ingredient of blues anyway?
Say again?
That quarter tone approach that's only present in blues anyway, ever since.
Yes. That was I think you came later a little bit. That was the first half an hour of
I'm late to the party.
Yes. But you basically that's the concept. You take the things that have been eminent in blues but which are not so present, maybe only from my perspective, and you bring them back into teaching in order to liberate and finding out on your own. Yeah, good. So maybe I can play one last thing. No, I said it's an expansion, not a replacement. Opening new sonic possibilities, thinking of sound, not theory. And I'm very happy about my very last slide, and I'm going to play a little bit. Cool. Wenn ihr wollt, können wir jetzt noch einen Kaffee trinken gehen oder so. Ne? Ich baue mich zusammen.